Hello and welcome to Ephemera. I'm fantasy author Katie Brisky.
And I'm editor Jen R. Albert. We hope you are enjoying our theme music courtesy of Alex White. Welcome to anybody joining us for the first time, and welcome back to those of you who have visited our virtual home before. For those of you who are new, Ephemera is an award-nominated reading series chaired by Katie and myself.
Pre-COVID, we held events in the Glad Day Bookshop. And while we await our triumphant return, we are very glad to share this refuge with you, right here on YouTube. And we would like to begin tonight by acknowledging that the land on which I live and work is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. This land is covered under Treaty 13 and is part of the Dish with One Spoon.
And the land on which I live and work is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas, and is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. Additionally, this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation.
We all need refuge. We all need safe places to renew and restore ourselves, whether physical, spiritual, or otherwise. Many of you know that I often find my refuge among Toronto's trees and ravines, connecting with myself by connecting with the land. It's a privilege I do not take for granted. One of my walks in particular carries me over ground called Gede Onegumen, or at the Old Portage in Ojibwe, a portage trail between the Don and Humber rivers. This land is the refuge on which I live and work, but I do not lose sight of the histories beneath my feet or the ongoing injustices around me. I want to take another slant on refuge as well. They can be misused. This past week, the government of Newfoundland and Labrador opted not to rename the Colonial Building in St. John's, citing an online poll in which 69% of respondents said the name should remain the same. Perhaps taking refuge in a comfortable excuse? The president of Nunavut, Johannes Lamp, responded, "Reconciliation is not comfortable. By its very nature, it means having to make decisions that are not always popular, but necessary in order to ensure the interests of marginalized members of society are respected and protected. We cannot hide ourselves away from doing the right thing. We cannot retreat from uncomfortable, disruptive change to colonialist structures. We cannot shelter ourselves from unpopular decisions, hard truths, or criticisms. Refuges are meant to be temporary. Our hope is that tonight, in this ephemeral space that we create together, you can find a temporary respite from your own griefs and stresses, the chance to find strength in community and wonder in new worlds. All we ask is that you take what you find here and bring it with you on your journey. Use it for change, use it to face discomfort, and use it to make something better for your community. Thank you.
Welcome once again to this month's event. Next up, congratulations are in order for many Ephemera alumni recognized at this weekend's Aurora Awards, including Fonda Lee, Preeti Mohammed, Phoebe Barton,
Kari Morin, Kelly Robson, and Brandon Crilly. We'd also like to congratulate When Words Collide and Randy McCharles for Best Fan Organizational.
And that's all our news. That concludes our news portion.
Are you sure?
Increasingly less so every week.
Foreshadowing! But we have no time for that now. Let us welcome our first reader. I'm very pleased to welcome Julie C. Day. Julie C. Day's novella, The Rampant, is a Lambda Award finalist. Her genre-bending collection, Uncommon Miracles, contains some of her most beloved work. She's also editor-in-chief of the anthology Weird Dream Society. Julie is currently working on the novel Stories of Drish, as well as acting as series editor and publisher of the anthology Dreams for a Broken World, to be published under her Reckoning Press imprint, Essential Dreams Press. Julie has published over 40 stories in magazines such as The Dark, Split Lip Magazine, Black Static, Podcastle, and the Cincinnati Review. You can find her online at This Julie Day or at stillwingingit.com. Welcome, Julie.
Hi, welcome. I'm having a little lagging, so raise your hand to me virtually if this goes awry. I was going to read something that's coming out in Black Static, but I have a work in progress, a novelette that I'm going to read the beginning of um, instead, because it ends up being about refuge, and I thought that would be a great tie. Um, it's called, our working title is Against the Ropes. September 21st, 2025, Baltimore, Maryland. The big change, the medical miracle, the one moment it's called. Always capitalized. For most people, personal moments are just so much unnecessary background noise when compared to that singular event. Not me, obviously. I'm lonely, thank God. So damn lonely. It's Saturday night and I'm sprawled out in the lobby of City Arts Apartments, sitting on the pleather couch, dreaming of second chances. 2.8 million people used to live in the greater Baltimore metropolitan area. 622,000 residents lived in the city itself. Even the 6-story building on East Oliver Street held a plurality of 70 souls, give or take. Sure, the COVID vaccine finally arrived and eventually we all got our jabs, or didn't, but that didn't mean the world suddenly turned rosy. Why should it? It never was before. No wonder so many embraced the big change. Baltimore isn't empty, but since girlfriend number 4, Megan, moved out, I'm all alone. Queer girls in love or even lust just isn't a thing anymore. Who needs it? That's what Megan said. A statement, not a question, as far as she was concerned. And who was I to argue? Yeah, that's right. No one special. Or more clearly, special to no one. Off to my right, from the vicinity of the City Arts Gallery, that community space where apartment buildings residents used to try for culturally rooted and inspired, there are all sorts of noises I'm choosing not to investigate. Slow, deliberate footsteps and the scrape of something heavy as it's dragged along the hardwood floor. Old man Frederick's iron sculpture, Rusting Joy, perhaps, or that piano Miss Sophie donated when she first moved into her top floor single. I always liked Frederick's sculpture, all those bent lines like a tangled vine stretching itself toward the light. I'm not sure I ever told him, and now Frederick is long gone. I heard he swallowed yellow pills down, then waited, muttering the entire time for his heart to physically stop. I try not to imagine that moment as his heart slowed. I try even harder to imagine him waiting, not to imagine him waiting, surrounded by a building's worth of disinterest. Vines don't just choke off their own life, at least not if they have any other choice. I have a journalism degree from the University of Maryland and a decades-old interest in the Ouija board. I have no idea how electrical and chemical pathways work. What do I know? What I do know is we feel because we should. It's human passions that connect people to one another, or at least that used to be the case. But the medical miracle turned us all around. This new Frederick's empty world is ruled by those words first heard at the Baltimore Lyric Opera House. The time is now to eradicate loathing, eradicate adoration, eradicate all feelings and save our world. It's time to be free. Despite the storylines in all those post-apocalyptic movies, Mad Max, Terminator, World War Z, the actual end of the world isn't a spray of blood and limbs. Instead, the end of the world is filled with a seemingly endless litany of voices calmly repeating, I just don't care. To the revolution, I mutter, then tip my head back and swallow the last of my twist cap gin. Nihilistic self-pity. Right now, it's all I've got. My Maryland, my heart. I raise my bottle in a mock salute. You goddamn motherfuckers. It's all such an unnecessary shame. Scene break. This is what I know about our human needs. Life is an endless series of school bus moments in which Zach Bellum, the fifth grader with the shaggy hair and too small coat, holds out his hand. Up high, down low. Sorry, man, too slow. While he leaves you hanging. Yeah, sure, he has his reasons, but that's not my point. Our biochemically charged brains fall for that asshole Zach's game every time. Down low, too slow. Emotions are the ultimate delusional drug. We're constantly translating failure into try again. It takes something unnatural, something laboratory designed and consciously controlled, and yes, something filled with the hubris of a man like Dr. Charles Glacier, to break the cycle of hope and steer our minds on a different course. How did so many people agree with Dr. Glacier's chemical adjustments that they were worth the price? They forgot to wait for their brain's natural impulses to light up the correct pathway, the one that says, don't stop, try again. And yes, even without Dr. Glacier, that try again has, over the last few years, become a much tougher task. February 14th, 2009, College Park, Maryland. Clearly a scene break. Maryland and I are only 19, less than 2 years distant from high school drama and parental expectations. We've both left our hometowns behind, and now it's on to a new life at the University of Maryland. Adults, we whisper, true love, authenticity. Our parents, they'd never understand. We don't think to compare notes on the details of our other earlier lives. It's all feelings, emotions, otherwise known as chemically catalyzed love. The best of all possible highs, just as sustainable. On this particular Wednesday, I'm flying solo. Marilyn's almost an hour away in Baltimore, sweating, bruising it up as she flies high on endorphins, an upper right, a combination, and then especially for those asshole bros who talk trash while sparring, the corkscrew. A blow she spent months perfecting and hoping of breaking skin. No such luck. Being a woman in a boxing gym means taking all of the shit and not backing down. It's even more of a solitary sport for women than for men. Though that thrill when your punch not only lands, but actually destroys, that is boxing's one moment of true equality. That thrill drove Maryland and her heroes, Lucia Riker, Ann Wolfe, as much as it drove Ali or Holmes. As Maryland trains, I sit through my commentary and editorial writing class, work my shift at Mom's Organic Market, and eat my cup of noodles and apple. Afterward, I'll follow all that up by pretending to research that punching down article on power dynamics for Reich's class. Punching down. I couldn't resist. Actual metaphorical sisterhood with my muscle-bound love. Right now, though, it's commentary, class, and Professor Benfield's lecture, Developing a Topic. So what defines an intelligent response? Professor Benfield asks. A rhetorical question thrown out while he writes on the whiteboard. Power equals persuasive facts. And already I'm disagreeing, silently. Words feel so hard to form when you know the other person, in this case, Benefield, won't understand. The 20s cyclone of hatred and reckless denials are over a decade in the future. Still, even back then, I sensed the truth. Power is more than logic trees and data collection, more than carefully crafted sentences and nuanced debate. Real power, lasting change, also requires charged neurochemical pathways and muscular strength, individuals standing up. Take, for instance, my Maryland. For in 2009, she was most definitely mine. She wouldn't have made it 2 days at Joe's boxing gym if she didn't have to follow through. Of her this morning as we lay in our bed brings a flush to my cheeks and a warmth that spreads down and deeper still. My love-addled brain drowns out the here and now idiocy with the soft pressure of Marilyn's lips, that sense of time dilation as her hands slip across my belly and between my thighs. Soon enough, I'm wet, eager, the two of us tangled in our bed covers, until I kick those damn sheets out of the way. God, the moist heat of skin against skin, her throaty hum as I explore her folds with searching fingers. And then laptops are closing, backpacks and messenger bags once again slung across shoulders. Commentary class is done. I've managed an entire hour and a half public without speaking to a single human soul. Hey, a voice says. Addie, right? Winning streak broken. And I think that's about 10 minutes. Does that sound right? Okay.
Thank you so much, Julie. You know what your writing reminds me of? You know those like glass sun catchers that you put in windows? And then they kind of spin like out in different directions? That's what it kind of reminds me of. Because like you catch these flashes and these glimmers and then kind of winging off again somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
really
eventually
cool.
they all tie together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, it's really cool. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you for opening our show.
All right.
Over to you,
That
Jen.
was fun. And I appreciate you listening to a work in progress.
Oh, we love works in progress. Get excited. You know, I feel like there is news, isn't there? What if we made some sort of space where you could like gather us around and tell us the news, something like, what's the word?
Like a refuge?
Yeah, that's the one.
Perhaps like the swamp witch's cabin, our dear friend, or the back of the space whale, or the haunted manor at which we occasionally find ourselves.
Yeah, just like that, like those places.
Well, we've got to pick one. We can't have everyone in the audience splitting off to 3 different places. So are we going to retreat to the swamp witch's cabin, the space whale, or the haunted manor? You can vote in the chat or tell us on Twitter.
Where will we go? And while you do that, it is my pleasure to introduce our poet tonight. Tonya Liburd shares a birthday with Simeon Daniel and Ray Bradbury, which may tell you a little something about her. She has been a recipient of the Ontario Arts Council Writers Grant and a 2021 Horror Writers Association Diversity Grant. Her work either is or has been used in course materials, including Writing the Other, as examples of code switching. She is also an editor over at The Expanse magazine. You can find her blogging at www.tonya.ca. How did you get that? I love it. Or at Twitter at Some Silly Wowzer. I will put those in chat. Or you can join her Patreon at patreon.com/Tonya Liburd. Welcome.
Hi. All right, here goes the first poem. It is called Let Me In. And this was, you can hear me, right? You can hear, okay, good. This one's called Let Me In. And it was a 2018 Risen Award nominee. Here we go. Child of dragon, child of fairy, child of almost every myth that you are told, save for those of my people, ancient where yours are men old, left to wither and die out in the cold. Let me in. I hover and behold beyond the window, a female, a family, a play of manners, of words, of life. My ethereal form, rejected by wards, lies told of me, lies old as me. But I see rot within the apple, the key to undoing plot. I whisper to the female, let me in. I see your pain, private violations happening behind closed doors. I know well what vengeance is stoked, riding in the belly like a pregnancy that will never leave. I have my own vengeance to wreak. It keeps me staying on when my circumstances would leave 1 week. Let me in, and let us ride the wave of vengeance together. Ah, I see that you hear me. Post breath to living ears. It makes the hand seize its shaking and dries the river of tears. I am too new violation, raped, thrice by raiders to my village before being brought to this new civilization because they thought they could have use of me, the middle-aged village magic woman. I had my vengeance too, when one day they said, "You heal our queen, she carries an heir. Your ancestors ravaged my body, my home, my people, my life, and yet expected me to be fair. The queen had me burned at the stake. My body may be no more, but my soul is wide awake. Let me in, let me in. What sweet havoc shall we make? Let me be the answer to generations of familial corruption in all forms, spiritual, moral. Let me in. I see you eyeing the wards to keep me out. I see you disabling some now. I see you skulking about. Will you undo them all? Oh, my child, will you finally let me in? Oh, wonderful, my child. Let us go wild on these sodomizers of children, these ravaging warriors of gentle villagers, these hoarders of money and privilege. Oh, come now, don't whine. This is not my first time, but I will enjoy the carnage, the bloodletting, the evisceration we shall commit together, my spirit in your body, now that you've let me in. And now that all is done, ancient words shall be spun on the wall with blood from my soul to your fingers, words for the ones that come after. Her soul recoils in horror at what is before her, and we stand apart as she finds her actions too much to bear. She pulls at her clothes, rips at her hair, then finds a knife. No more strife for her as her lifeblood, as her life's blood, the slumping body joins the others on the floor. My only wish is for more and more, but I am satisfied to wait for the next spot in the apple to rot, and then I shall whisper, as ever, let me in. It's poem number 1. Poem number 2. All right, 1 second. There we go. Sorry about that. Here we go. All right, possession. This one has not been published yet, so you're getting a bit of a preview of it. You start to hear me, or rather, a tapping in the walls, down the halls, never able to pinpoint the spot. Tap, tap, tap. I love you. I'll never leave you alone. You think you start to see me in the corners of your vision, a thing whose presence you feel along your back, going up your spine. You think I'm watching what you're reading over your shoulder. I am. I love you. I'll never leave you alone. You hear the rapping, the tapping, tap, tap, tap. Coming closer, rap, tap, tap. You hear it in the corners of your mind when you sleep, tap, tap, tap. Let me in. I love you. I'll never leave you alone. Slowly, surely, you change. You argue more with loved ones, pick fights with strangers, act out on vendettas. You suspect I may not be what I say I am, but I will always tell you, I love you. I'll never leave you alone. You start to lose time, minutes, hours, days. You're accused of things you don't ever recall doing. Why is that body there, bent in that peculiar way? Hush, my dear. This is what happens when you let me in. I love you, and I'll never leave you alone. You think you need help and start seeking out help from books, psychics, priests. But soon you realize that you can't tell them what you really want to say because I can always change what comes out because I know best, my dear. What do they know anyway? I love you and I will never leave you alone. You want this. You know this is the best thing that's ever happened to you because deep down in your heart, where your unspoken words keep you company like a blanket, where I made a space for you to stay while I take control more and more, you know you love it because I love you and I will never leave you alone. You can never go back to your old life, even if I abandoned you. Too many people are gone. Too many things are done. Too many things have changed. I hold the reins and let you see things from time to time. Otherwise, you're nestled deep within, caught in my embrace. You're beautiful, I tell you. I still love you as much as I ever did. I still want us to be friends. I'll never leave you. I love you. I'll never leave you alone. Excellent. Is that 10 minutes?
I had like actual shivers going down my spine for both of them. Like the way you use, I find like first of all, the two poems spoke to each other so wonderfully, and second, the use of repetition and the imagery in the poem and the way it keeps circling back, and you kind of hit us more every time. It's like, oh my goodness.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight.
No problem.
And I hate to leave the space that we've created, but I know that we are going to a refuge that we are making together. So where have we ended up?
We are going on the space whale.
I mean, lovely.
Yes. So you can tell us now, right?
Well, I mean, the space whale is pretty awesome. And it is a very familiar place for those longtime listeners and viewers. But I'm not sure it's a refuge just yet. I mean, the void of space is pretty cold. The space whale is lovely and a mammal, so I feel pretty warm and cozy. But like, I think there's just something missing. I think we need a library. We need to have some books on this space whale.
That's true. It's pretty big. I think you're right. But there's a lot of us. So everyone gets to choose one book.
Oh, that's really hard.
Yeah, but I think we're sticking by it. If you could choose just one book to bring on the space whale to read while you're riding the space whale, tell us in chatter on Twitter.
Yes. I don't think I could choose. I'm glad our audience is braver than I. And while you think of your book to bring on the space whale, I'm very pleased to introduce our next reader. Emma Tennier-Stuart is an emerging author whose writing is often historical, usually speculative, and always queer. Originally from Ontario, she is now based in St. John's, Newfoundland. With a master's degree in folklore and a professional background in museums and archives, Emma is happiest when using fantasy and the speculative to carve out imagined spaces in history for her queer ancestors. Thank you for being here, Emma. We're so glad to have you.
Thanks so much, Katie. I'm so glad to be here. Hi, everyone. So I'm also going to be reading something that is still something of a work in progress, but it felt like it suited the theme fairly well, so I wanted to do that. Just a quick content warning. There is an element that is up for interpretation, but could be interpreted as having to do with suicidal ideation. So just a heads up on that one. The Mermaid and the Antiquarian. The setting is Zenar, the West Penwith Peninsula in Cornwall, which is technically a part of England, and in the very beginning of the 20th century. Every summer the mermaids sang, but only Alice still heard them. Every summer the visitors came. They came to this most remote part of Cornwall from upcountry, from England, with their billowing white linens and their how-do-you-dos and their easels and their midweek picnics. They stayed in the granite-built church town and came to flirt with each other, the startling young people chaperoned only by each other, and to write and to paint. Every summer, the visitors from England marveled at the wooden mermaid carved into a pillar of the parish's stout medieval church, her features burnished by centuries of curious hands. The visitors expressed their satisfaction with this Cornish mystery as they traced her scales with their fingertips and told each other the legend of the mermaid. That once, it did not matter when, life then was surely much as it was now in this parish at the edge of the world, she lured a young man away beneath the waves. And every summer Alice celebrated her birthday. Every time she grew another year older, the parish goodwives would tease her and say that perhaps this was the year she would let one of their young men court her. Every year she would say, "No, no, I have no desire to marry." And every birthday night, less and less able to convince herself that she could somehow remain a maiden working her parents' farm forever, she would go down to her family's boat cove and weep saltwater tears until the mermaids sang. One fine June day, Alice's mother told her that her granny had made a request. "She's got a new lodger," her mother said. "She'll be needing eggs and milk. You'll make the delivery tomorrow morning." The next day, Alice neatly separated the milk and cream into pails and arranged the eggs in a straw-lined basket, then loaded up the cart to head to her granny's. She stopped only once to pick a posy of the hedge flowers that were all growing together by the post marking her arrival at the church town. Alice could hear voices coming from the open door of her granny's white cottage, so she let herself in. With her pails in one hand and the flowers and basket of eggs in the other, she stepped into the sitting room. The moment she entered the room, she knew her granny was not there, for the room fell silent, and such a thing had never happened while Granny was holding court. Instead, the room was filled with English visitors in various poses of leisure. Some had draped themselves on the chairs and couch Granny had arranged around the room, while some were sitting barefoot and cross-legged on the stone floor. "Lo," one visitor said, "a perfect Cornish maid." "Flowers, milk pails, and all," another said. "All she's missing is a basket of fish." Alice felt her cheeks flame red and resented knowing that their rosiness surely completed the picture. She stumbled over her apologies and backed out of the room, though not before noticing the quiet gaze of a tidily dressed young man who sat upright in a chair in the corner of the room. Thoroughly discomfited, Alice fled to the kitchen where Granny was sure to be. "Oh-ho," Granny said upon seeing her. She was indeed in the kitchen, floury to her elbows as she worked at her never-ending scones. "Fallen afoul of my guests, maid?" Alice gave Granny a mutinous look. Granny just laughed. "Did you meet my lodger?" she asked as Alice put the milk and cream and eggs away and tucked the flowers into a clean jug. "Which one was he?" "Dressed more respectable than the rest," Granny said, in a tone that belied a fondness for the unrespectability of the other visitors. "Quiet, but the others seemed to like him." "I saw him." "He's an antiquarian," Granny said. She pronounced the word with care. "He's come down to study us folk." Alice raised an eyebrow, but Granny said, "Scorn him if you like, maid, but he's asked me to introduce him to whoever knows the most folk songs round here, and I've told him there's none finer in all of Penwith than you." "Granny!" "It's true, maid, and you know it, so you're to come back here with me after church this Sunday and share our Cornish songs with this antiquarian." That night Alice sat in the boat cove as the mermaids sang. When Granny escorted her into the sitting room where the antiquarian awaited her that Sunday, he seemed to regard her almost nervously. "A pleasure," he said. "Such a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time. I hope your family could spare you that I'm not taking you from—" Alice thought, he has no idea how any of us live. "Certainly not," Granny said, stepping in. "Now, what was it you wanted to hear?" "Oh, well, I don't know where to start. This is such rich country, and there's so much to— I had thought at one point to start with the local dialect. But then a book of songs, I thought. What a wonderful way of knowing a place, don't you think? Though you do have a fine Cornish accent, perhaps I could collect a few words, as a sort of gloss for the folk songs." "Some songs, then," Granny said, with a slight quirk of her lips. "Oh, yes, please," the antiquarian said, and bottling up his trembling excitement, he sat primly down in his chair. "I suppose I'll start with Lamorna," Alice said. "It's a favorite of everyone's round here." She launched into the lusty song, and Granny sat back in her rocking chair. Alice knew her singing voice couldn't be faulted. Everyone told her she had the sweetest voice in the parish, and she believed it. But throughout the song, the antiquarian frowned. "You didn't like it," she said. Granny sat up and looked at the antiquarian. "You sang beautifully," he said, "but I was hoping you would share some proper Cornish folk songs with me. I want to capture the essence of the Cornish people." "You'd be hard-pressed to find a soul in Cornwall who doesn't know that song, sir," Alice argued. Granny nodded in agreement. That's as may be, he said, but it isn't Cornish. It's just a music hall song with a Cornish place name substituted for the original. Don't you know anything properly Cornish? In the Cornish language, Granny asked. Nobody in Cornwall sings those anymore. Ah, do you know any Ball Maidens songs? None of my family have worked in the mines in generations, Alice responded. You might find some who would know the songs, but I certainly don't. Well, what sort of songs do you sing? The antiquarian asked. Alice was again amused. He seemed so frustrated, so surprised. You might call all of our songs music hall songs, sir, Alice said. I never stopped to think about it. I just sing the songs we all sing. There are hymns, too, if you want to hear those. No, the antiquarian said, that's not what I'm here for. A spark of humor took hold in his eyes then, and he said, though I suppose I should show some more respect to the power of a Cornish hymn. That's what your famous mermaid used to lure the young man to his death, after all. No, Alice protested, startling herself with her vehemence. He wasn't lured to his death. The antiquarian leaned forward, and Alice fancied he was holding his breath. That's the tale I always heard, but I've never heard it from the lips of a true Cornishman, or, in this case, Cornish woman. Tell me, what is the true tale? So Alice told him the tale the parishioners all knew, of the mermaid who was drawn to land by the handsome voice of Matthew Truella as he sang in church. She joined the church choir, and when they sang together every Sunday, the people of the parish knew there were no two voices more beautiful in all the world. But despite this beauty, the mermaid pined for home, and the more she told Matthew of her watery realm, the more he wanted to go there too. Finally, one Sunday after church, the two sat by the water's edge and sang until the mermaids of the cove came to greet them and bring them home. There, Alice told the antiquarian, they made an underwater life together, and it used to be said that you could hear them singing in the cove on summer nights. She didn't tell him that she could hear them singing still, or that he surely never would. In the weeks that followed, the antiquarian requested Alice's company after church each Sunday. At first, these afternoons saw him plumbing Alice with questions about local characters and folk tales. Then, when he had exhausted the possibilities of what could be described from the confines of Granny's small sitting room, he had shyly suggested that she show him some of the local sights she had already described. And so, with Granny huffing away behind them as they scrambled through the moors, Alice showed the antiquarian the quoits and burial mounds and balancing stones and standing stones and all the other eternal remnants of a time long past. At every monument, the antiquarian had questions. Are they still used now? What do the locals make of them? What old beliefs are there humming beneath the surface? All Alice ever said was, they're only old stones, sir. Couldn't say what they were ever used for. Alice did not show the antiquarian the boat cove where the mermaid sang to her each night. Talk in the parish changed. Alice had taken up with an outsider, an Englishman. She'd better hope he'd have her, for there were none in the parish now who would take her in her stuck-up ways. Every night Alice sat by the water and listened as the mermaid sang. At the end of July, the antiquarian told Alice he would have to miss their next Sunday together. He was needed back in London on some matter of business, but would be back within the week. When he returned, he brought with him a small book, which he pressed into Alice's hands, and then they spoke at length about local words he thought might have origins in the lost Cornish language. That night, by the stub of a tallow candle, Alice opened the cloth-bound book. To my Cornish mermaid, it read. The title was The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen. All through the next Sunday's sermon, Alice tried to decide how best to tell the antiquarian that she had hated the story. When he asked what she had thought of it, she hesitated, then said, It was so kind of you to bring me the book, sir. I found it very interesting, very... You didn't like it. The antiquarian jumped to his feet in his excitement. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, the antiquarian said. I debated long and hard with myself about whether or not to bring it to you. Your Cornishness is so pure, so untainted. I knew your love of the local mermaid tale, and I wasn't sure I should sully it with an outside influence. I should have known your soul was too strong to be at risk from such a threat. He sat down in satisfaction and asked her if wrecking was still practiced on the cliffs. As the antiquarian told Alice all he knew about the Cornish wreckers, Alice thought there were plenty in the parish who would enjoy the tale of the Little Mermaid. But the idea that the mermaid had given up her voice and her home, all for the terrible purpose of leaving a perfect life, free from the indignities of marriage, filled her with a cold hopelessness like drowning. July became August, and Alice began looking forward to September, when the antiquarian would leave with the rest of the English visitors, and Alice could fall back into the routine of harvest-time work. The antiquarian's efforts to mine the soul of Cornwall had been an amusing diversion that summer, and a welcome distraction from thinking about her future, but now she was ready to return to the farm work she loved. 2 weeks before the antiquarian was to leave, Alice found herself alone with him in Granny's sitting room while Granny worked in the kitchen. Alice, the antiquarian said, his face a shade of serious she had never before seen on him. I have a question for you, which you may have been expecting. There's no question I expect from you, sir, Alice said, puzzled. Ah, no? Well, I wondered if you might do me the honor of accompanying me back to London. We would marry here, of course. I wouldn't whisk you away before that. But might you wish for that, as I do? Alice, more baffled than she had ever been, said, Why do you wish to marry me, sir? What good would I be in London? As a muse, my dear girl, I have never encountered one so pure of spirit as you. You have brought me a clarity that is missing in my life. You are my Cornish mermaid, and I am bewitched by your soul. Alice thought. In the tale of the mermaid, it is she who brings the young man to her element, and not the other way round. Might I have the week to consider? She asked. I had never thought to leave Cornwall. Of course, the antiquarian said. All that week, Alice thought about the antiquarian's proposal. All that week, Alice thought about the gossip of the parish and wondered if any man there would deign to have her now, or if they would, if she could stomach such a union. All that week, Alice thought about what it would be like to be a wellspring of Cornishness in what she had heard to be a lonely, coal-grey city. All that week, Alice taught herself the songs of the mermaids who swam in the shallows, always just out of sight.
Ah! Man, as someone who has spent probably far too long reading books of that era, written by those sorts of people, wow, you captured that guy real well.
Good to know that all my time far too immersed in that era has paid off.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's just like, no, got that. Yep. Yeah, no, it's impressive how much I'm just like, Alice, I want to be your friend. And how much I'm like, antiquarian man, I don't like you very much. Thank you so much, Emma.
Thank you.
Righty. Well, let us return to our space whale, where we are traversing the void.
Full of books. We're on the space whale, not in the space whale, right?
Yes, we are on the space whale.
Oh, okay. We have lots of books, such as Emergency Space Whale Repair, which I feel will come in really handy.
Love it.
Yeah, Dahlgren, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but not the Douglas Adams book, the guide itself.
Oh, the actual
which is also
guide.
very useful. So great answers. Great, very practical answers.
We have more whimsy and fiction on this end. We have Night Watch by Terry Pratchett is a good comfort read. And I think I will be cheeky and suggest The Never-Ending Story. It might keep us entertained for a long time as we go.
Definitely.
And how lovely this is. Like, we have our own secret fort made of books and a space whale. But we often seek out refuges during difficult times. And I think the general state of the world continues to qualify as a difficult time.
Yeah, definitely. It does. What is an action that you all take to help yourself or your communities to weather these ongoing storms?
Let us know in the chat or tell us on Twitter.
And in the meantime, it is my great pleasure to introduce our final reader tonight. Renan Bernardo is a science fiction and fantasy writer from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. His fiction appeared or is forthcoming in Apex Magazine, Podcastle, Escape Pod, Daily Science Fiction, Translunar Traveler's Lodge, Solar Punk Magazine, Dark Matter Magazine, and others. What a list. He was one of the authors selected for the 2021 Imagine 2200 climate fiction contest with his story When It's Time to Harvest. In Brazil, he was a finalist for 2 important SFF awards and published multiple stories. His fiction has appeared in other languages as well. Welcome.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Katie, for having me. And I will read an unpublished climate fiction flash that I think has a lot to do with Refuge. And if it's too short, I can read another one that I also think that has a lot to do with Refuge. So my story is called Different Kinds of Fury. And is it too late to pray for a second storm? I was a little girl when my grandpa told me that in order to have health leaves, you first need health soil. And I'm an old grieving climate engineer. When I show my granddaughter, I'm disfiguring the woodlands close to our home. You're yanking off our trees, Granny, Julia crosses her arms, a wrinkle of heartbreak on her lips. Oh yeah, she's right. By a simple tap on my pad, a group of 7 trees rips out of the soil of what we call our backyard forest. The rings around their trunks switch on, air thrusters activating. The roots drip sap as the trees position themselves on the soil drones floating nearby. It's for a good reason, I say. The soil drone's edges gleam in blue as the roots cohere with the drone's medium. The backyard forest is where my beloved Emily and I laid our offerings and prayed for better tidings, where we terraformed, terra-healed our first river and collected fresh water from a grotto to nourish our saplings, and where I lost my lovely Emily to the first storm. But today, after years of love and cultivation, that place is also a lush extravaganza, a sanctuary in a world in need of oasis. Besides, I say, what did I say about the backyard forest, Julia? That it's not ours. And why? Flags can't be stuck on the soil. I wave a finger. Never. More soil drones glide down and the tree rings light up. More roots pulled out. More trees hovering and replanting themselves on the drones. I touch the pad and one of the drones comes to us, a bigger one, for sturdier trees. What about flying? I ask, wheeling our luggage and resting it on a soil drone. Can we? Oh, those hazelnut eyes glistening in the unwavering sunlight. We hop on the drone. I fasten our legs and waists to the strap system, clenching my teeth to ignore the pains in my leg and belly. In minutes, we're leaving home and wafting with our backyard forest all around us. Hundreds of trees dislocated from their bedding for the first time. Why is our home different? Julia asks as we fly and leave the rim of the terra-healed lands Emily and I projected. She gapes down at the wastelands that span all around, canyons that also caroled with water, lands trumed by drought, villages and ruins wrecked by a storm now silent. When I met your granny Emily, our home was not unlike all of this. Julia dares to look behind. Granny, our forest. She's crying. I drape an arm around her shoulders. It's gone. Our solitary house lies naked in our reserve, except for the copse where the family tombstones are located. Emily's and Josh's, Julia's father. I speak the next words with a lump in my throat. Our backyard forest is needed somewhere else, sweetie. The forests where she learned to walk, where she planted her first seeds and said goodbye to Joshi. It can't be easy to see it scattered. It isn't for me. We start to descend toward the refugee tents and shanties. Hundreds of thousands of them are scattered across the wastelands of a dissolute climate collapse. The shred of a river cuts the camp like a scar, threatening to extinguish itself. Tired eyes stare up, calloused hands pointing at the forest that descends from the skies. My soil drones spread, detecting the best spots to position their nutrient-packed modules. Julia gapes at the roots as they wriggle out of the soil drone's bases and stick to the blister-painted land that longs to be green. She turns back at my grimace. Are you in pain, Granny? It's those old bones of mine, sweetie. Our soil drone lands with a soft thud. Julia grabs my hand as we hop off. A woman approaches to greet us, peppering ladybugs on the soil from a basket in her hands. One day, Emily came to me like that, a tired, thirsty wanderer, but with a boy in her arms instead of soil harmonizing tiny bots. Ju, this is Akpena, our new friend. We will spend some time here. Akpena smiles and shakes Julia's hand, It warms my heart that Julia smiles back because she'll see that face a lot in the coming years. Her eyes gleam when some ladybugs shining red and drill holes into the dry land while while we while the warm wind scatters other ones. Is the soil red for coupling? I say. Synth mycelium, nutrients, and everything else? Half of it is done, Akpena says, her eyes not evading from my Julia. I knew before my granddaughter joins protesting. You're now part of our storm too, Julia. But you always said those were furious times. I don't want to be part of it. Julia, sweetie, there are different kinds of fury. I hug her and close my eyes. Even if I can't be part of it, I pray for the storm that will breathe around the world from all the camps like that one. A storm of healing and blooming and granddaughters with futures. And that's it.
And I feel like with your fiction, you just like, oh, sorry, did you want to read your other piece? I think we've got like 3-ish minutes.
Okay. I can read the other one.
Sweet.
Okay. This one was published in Daily Science Fiction and in June. And it's about the refuge we find in other people. So it's called The Small Shop of Me. Olaf sold his left eye. He unplugged it from its socket and laid it over the counter. It fizzled for a second, staring at the buyer with a dead gleam. The buyer, a blind man in his 80s, scanned his thumb on the pay reader and respectfully bowed his head. Olaf dropped the eye into his hand like a coin. The buyer plugged it and left the shop with a smile, stick under the arm. The shopkeeper's buzz receded and the stench of compacted trash filled the air. Time to close the shop and go to the drugstore. I want the usual stuff, Olaf told Breno, the pharmacist, pressing his thumb on the pay reader. What happened with your eye, Olaf? They had been neighbors, shared beers and bed, but Olaf got distance from him, as he did from most of his friends since his brother got sick. Business diversification. You should take care, Breno said, giving him the packed serum, briefing out cigar and unresolved issues. He didn't tell Breno his shop was empty with nothing else to sell but himself. Olaf grabbed the pack and left for the hospital, which is brighter than the shop's alleyway, but instead of noodles and fries, it smells of antiseptic farewells. He entered his brother's bedroom, smiling and leaving the serum over the bedside table, where a nurse had left a lonely, withering sunflower. You sold your eye, Alan accused him, eyes brimming with tears, arms, legs, and face paralyzed from severe biografting refusal. You shouldn't do that. Olaf didn't say anything, but yes, he should. Scene break. Olaf sold his left arm. It was for a boy who wanted a third one. It's for volleyball, the kid told him as he paid for it. Olaf uncoupled the arm and gaped at his family's tattoo, cartooned versions of him, Alan, and their dead fathers. He tattooed it to honor his father's month before the world started grafting everyone to contain the fleshly plague. Any problem, sir? The boy asked. Olaf shook his memories away. It should have been his right arm, but he was right-handed. Hope you like tattoos, boy. Scene break. It was buying Friday fest. Olaf sold his right foot, his left kidney, and his ears. He sold 4 of his ribs, even his heart, which he replaced with clockworks supposed to function as his cardiovascular system. The last customer of the day was a short woman with golden-plated skin. Widow, dead children, dark fleshly circles around tiring mirroring eyes. She smelled of poppies and peonies. He would have preferred sunflower, but that was not the case. To her, he sold his shop, his family business, his father's pride, his heritage, all he had left. Olaf had never made so much money in a single day. Scene break. I can pay for your medicine and the hospital room for 1 year, Olaf told Alon, exhaling rust and relief, hobbling into his brother's bedroom. It should be enough, but it wasn't. And Olaf didn't have anything else to sell but the legs he used to visit Alon, the eyes to see if he was buying the correct serum, and the arm to carry the medicine. What will you do, Olaf? You sold everything for me, and now you see me dying anyway. No, he wouldn't. Scene break. Olaf met the golden-skinned lady at her shop, her eyes soaking with loneliness and longing. The place had been renovated with lamps, statuettes, and furniture on sale. They all glinted off colors he had never achieved himself. He placed the packed medicine on the counter and pushed it toward her, along with a luggage containing all his brother's belongings. She pressed her gilded thumb on Olaf's pay drive. He sold her a friend. That's it.
And thank you. I'm so glad that we got that piece as well. Like every time I listen or read to your fiction, I get my heart broken and like it. You crack it open and put the seed in there. No, it's definitely a good thing. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think we've made a really nice refuge here with all of our stories and all of our readers tonight.
There's a lot we can do.
Audience? Yeah. What has our audience suggested?
To create refuge ourselves, our communities. One audience member, Sienna, gives friend hand massages. Very relaxing.
Rob on Twitter suggests reading, and he says, a story is a refuge you carry with you, which I really love.
Sure. Love it. Honestly, with so many good friends here on the Space Whale, great fiction, a chance to reconnect with things that mean so much to me. I feel like we've all made a refuge here tonight. It's too bad the event's almost over.
Well, it might be time to share that news. Drum roll, please.
Woo.
With much gratitude to the Ontario Arts Council for their ongoing funding support, we are honored to let you know that Prancy lives for 2023.
Yay! That's right. Our grant to the OAC was successful, so we will be bringing you another year of speculative readings and art. We have some ideas already about how to continue to grow this series and help serve our little community as best it can. But we welcome your thoughts as well here on Twitter, in our email. Please do let us know if there's any one you would like to see or any type of
or art. Any themes. Art. You can always feel free to reach out to the skeleton deer at Ephemera series on Twitter and just Ephemera series at Gmail. Cool.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Until next time, don't forget to follow us on that Twitter and here on YouTube, on Facebook at Ephemera series as well. Please subscribe to this YouTube page. And we would like to thank the Ontario Arts Council doubly and the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America for their funding assistance.
And as we close out tonight, we'd also like to thank our fabulous readers, composer Alex White, our friends, families, loved ones, and you. Thank you for staying with us, and we will see you for our next event on September 21st, right here on YouTube.
See everybody, guys. Bye. Bye.
See ya.